Jason Roberts' Persuasive Speech. Little audience. Let you hold that. Alright, we good to go?
Yeah.
Alright. In the past few years, there has been a lot of debate about whether we should switch to alternative resources such as solar or wind energy, nuclear energy, as opposed to oil and natural gas resources, which in the long run, as technology advances, will be a very good idea, and I think we can make a lot of steps towards making a lot of advances in new sources of resources instead of using oil and natural gas to get away from oil and natural gas. But currently, we do not have the technology to completely make a switch. Electric cars aren't the most reliable resource. They're not as affordable as they should be for most people. Low incomes, such as myself, can't afford an electric car or a hybrid car. And oil is also still the most used resource currently in the world, and especially in the US, we use more oil than anyone else. So it's very important that we keep it around. Yet, the president of our country has actually put a halt to expanding drilling to other places, such as Alaska or the Gulf of Mexico. So we can't go out and find new places to drill for oil. So if we actually were to go out and find new places to drill for oil, it would create jobs, it would create tax revenue, it'll give insurance to families that aren't insured when they are badly needing insurance so they can visit a doctor. So with us being energy independent, we will no longer need other countries to import as much oil. Although we will need to import oil still, we won't need to import as much oil. It'll make us more energy independent. So, as I stated, the US does use more oil than any other country. I have a few graphs here, and you can see as the global consumption here per capita, the US and Canada is far ahead of other industrialized countries. You could actually compare all three of the other members of the graph here and add them together. They don't even compare to the United States and Canada. In oil consumption, we use far more oil than any other country. And most of our oil that we use in our country is for combustible engines, mostly for transport. That's what this graph here is. It shows, motor gasoline is by far the most used for oil in our country at the current time, and it probably always will be. We have to use it for transportation. And while American production has gone down, imports of oil have skyrocketed, which is what this graph here shows. You can see that this actually is thousands of barrels, and it shows, so when it shows 450,000, that's actually times 1,000, which would actually be 450 billion barrels of oil a year that we import, and our production is slowly on the decline because we're not allowed to find new places to drill for oil. So there are many places in the US with plentiful amounts of oil, but we have not yet to find or use them. Some of them we have found, some of them we haven't, but for example, Alaska has estimated 503 million to upwards of 9.3 billion barrels that they have yet to even drill out of the ground, let alone refine and use. So it potentially is a lot of oil that we can create for ourselves. No need to import from other countries. We can support ourselves. And also the Gulf Coast. The U.S. hasn't been allowed to drill down there for some time now. So countries like China and Russia, South America, Venezuela, who may not have our best intentions, are buying that area up and putting their own oil rigs in, creating a lot of revenue for themselves, which is oil that we potentially, more than likely, will end up buying back, since we are the highest consumption of oil in the world as the United States. Most of us use cars for everyday life. I'm sure everyone in this room uses a car at some point in time in their everyday life, whether they ride with someone or drive to work, to go get groceries. Even transporting your groceries to the store that you buy uses gas, so that's also another vehicle use that we're using gasoline for, and oil is a huge part of gasoline. We do have the choice of electric cars, as I stated before, but they're not perfected and nor affordable for everyone. One day they may be, but they currently are not. They also run on batteries, which is not the most efficient, especially in cold weather. For example, here in Nebraska, if you want to run an electric car, you can probably expect about half of the battery life in the winter as you could in the summer, because batteries just don't react well with the cold weather. They need to be charged with electricity is another issue, which most electricity in our country is produced in some way, shape, or form by a combustible engine, which uses oil. So you're still using oil when you're producing that electricity, so you're still going to have to outsource in some way, shape, or form for oil. And the problem with electric cars may be resolved someday, but currently is not exactly the most technologically advanced. Hopefully someday we can get there, but right now it's not perfected, so we can work on it in that area, but we still need oil. So what about jobs? The U.S. has struggled recently in the last decade or so creating jobs, mostly in the last 5 or 6 years. Unemployment has risen to all-time highs. And expanding oil drilling would create thousands of jobs potentially. People have, in North Dakota, actually for the pipeline, moved out of their way from other states just to go and work for the oil pipeline so they can make money, because it's either their profession or they're jobless. And if anyone who has been jobless knows that if you get desperate, you'll pretty much do anything, move anywhere to get a job, especially in a time where unemployment is as high as it is. A lot of people need insurance benefits, which these jobs would also create. A lot of families need insurance benefits for their kids, you know, for their spouses. Their families need to go to the doctor, they need the insurance benefits, and these jobs could also create that. Expanding oil drilling creates a boom for the economy, which is good for everyone. It creates tax revenue for the government, so they could even appreciate expanding oil drilling. I would think that they could understand that they're going to make more tax revenue off the jobs it creates. Everyone has to pay taxes. The more jobs you have, the more taxes that are paid in. There are many people that are opposed to oil drilling because of oil spills, which is a valid point. No one in their right mind wants there to be a major oil spill of any sort in any place. I sure don't want an oil spill. I'm sure no one in this room wants an oil spill. It can't be stopped, but with proper precautions and safety measures taken, it can be prevented. And the lesson, I guess, here to learn is not to stop drilling for oil, but to put more safety precautions in place so that it's a safer thing to do, and that when there is an oil spill, it can be not just prevented, but they can stop it while it's happening. They need to work on getting more safety precautions in place for that. The fact of the matter is, drilling goes on all around the world for oil, and you very rarely hear of an oil spill. And when you do, it's cleaned up in a matter of a few months, and very little environmental damage permanently is actually done. There's an oil spill in the ocean, a lot of the currents actually take that elsewhere and it dissipates, so much of the pollution isn't centrally located. It actually dissipates out, which makes it very less harmful to the environment. And if more safety precautions are put in place, that it would ensure the safety of people that work on the oil rigs and the environment itself. So, another argument against oil is emissions. A lot of people are about global climate change, global warming you might call it, and a lot of people think that the use of oil combustion engines is a huge part of global climate change. There are other people that argue against it, but we're not going to get into global climate change here. It's about oil. So, just talking CO2 emissions. Oil itself is only known to emit about 3.2% of the total amount of harmful CO2 in the environment. The other 96.8 or so percent is actually caused from natural things in the environment. Volcanoes is number one. Another thing that causes it is wildfires. That's a lot of CO2 emissions in wildfires. And then just animals living in the wild. I mean, when they breathe or anything they do in the environment is affected by animals, as well as ourselves breathing and other environmental factors. I also agree that we do need to lower emissions, that we need to find some way to do that, but this is no reason to fall behind industrially to other countries at this moment in time when we need the money as much as they need the money, and we need the jobs as bad as any other country has needed jobs at this point in our country. So in order for the U.S. to stay ahead in the world of energy production, we will one day need to find technology and expand it to get into alternative energy sources. However, we don't have that technology currently, so we do run on oil. The world runs on oil, it's a fact. Everyone knows it, and right now we import more oil than any other country, so we're spending a lot of money on oil. So in order for us not to fall behind in the race to become a leader in energy, it is imperative that we explore new places in our own country to drill for oil so we can create our own revenue and lower our need to import and possibly even export our own oil to other countries to create revenue for ourselves. With the expansion in drilling, we will create jobs and it will spark local economies as well as the entire economy as a whole. It will allow us to rely on our own energy and reduce the amount of money that we spend on importing oil from foreign dictatorships that might not have our best interests in mind. We can all agree that oil may not be the permanent energy source, but for now it is the most reliable and we must take advantage of it. So if anyone has any questions or arguments against anything I've said, go ahead and ask.
I agree with you 100%.
Chris?
Besides Alaska, what other possible drill sites are there in America?
Well, they've explored the Gulf of Mexico and Alaska are the two biggest, which is why I hit on those two the most. But I know they've had talk about New Mexico is a big spot. They've even talked about Colorado. There's supposed to be a lot down there. But the problem with Colorado using it is obviously the Rocky Mountains are a huge factor. They can't drill through a lot of that stuff, and a lot of it is national landmarks, so they can't actually affect it. But they say there is a lot in New Mexico, possibly California, and off the coast of California they actually have oil rigs up that they drill for oil, but they won't let them drill new rigs because we have a moratorium right now, which pretty much means that we're not allowed to search for more oil currently. Although they're not going to stop the drilling we're already doing, but if it hasn't been found already, they're pretty much not going to search for it.
Do you think that's because we're just waiting for other countries to run out before we use up our own resources?
It could be possible. Maybe we wait until they are lower on their source for oil, and then we use our resources to try to export it to them. It would be a good idea maybe in the future, but for now it seems that we're spending more money than ever. I mean, even on the news recently they're talking $5 a gallon gas during the summer of this year, which is a huge part on reserves, oil reserves. They're worried about the reserves of oil running low, and then countries can pretty much demand what they want for the amount of oil. So if they want to raise the price, there's nothing we can do about it. We still have to buy it because we need to use it. If there's no more questions, I think we're good.
All right.
I'll clap.
Stop.